after conception, neural tissue known as the neural plate forms in the outermost layer of embryonic cells. The neural plate folds to form the neural groove, then curls to form the neural tube. This tube differentiates into the forebrain, the midbrain, the hindbrain, and the spinal cord. The forebrain will develop into the cerebral cortex, which translates sensory stimulation. It also controls complex behaviours, thoughts, memories, and problem solving. The midbrain will develop into a neural relay station for sending information from the body to various sites in the brain. The hindbrain will control the most basic physiological processes, such as breathing and heart rate. The spinal cord is the pathway for conveying information between the brain and the rest of the body. Between weeks 4 and 8, the embryo grows rapidly and the face becomes recognisably human. The eyes on the side of the head begin to migrate forward and two distinct hemispheres of the cerebral cortex emerge. Between weeks 8 and 26 of the fetal stage, the cerebral cortex grows to cover the midbrain. By week 28, a major structural change begins. The cortex expands greatly in surface area and becomes wrinkled and folded inside of the skull. Beginning at week 28 and continuing through week 40, the brain surface fills with hills and valleys, called gyri and sulci. These cerebral folds and wrinkles help to create a vast neural network, which allows the brain to become a highly flexible yet precise control center and processor of information. By week 8, the structures of the brain are already in place, but the amount of brain tissue is rapidly increasing as many new nerve cells are formed. The formation of new cells is known as neurogenesis, or neural migration. During neurogenesis, new nerve cells migrate from the innermost layers of tissue outward. Like gymnasts climbing ropes, the young cells are guided to their final destination by fibers from another type of cell, the glial cell. Glial cells form the underlying structure of the nervous system. Although earlier formed cells rest closer to where they originated, later formed cells move further away from their starting point. In this way, the brain grows, adding layers to itself like the skins of an onion. Once each nerve cell reaches its destination, it begins to acquire characteristics specific to that area of the brain. At this point, each nerve cell sprouts the extensions it needs to communicate with other neurons. There are two types of extensions, dendrites and axons. Dendrites look like a network of antennas and receive incoming signals. An axon is a single, larger extension which carries outgoing signals to other neurons. Synaptogenesis is the process in which synapses proliferate in the brain. A synapse is a tiny gap between the dendrites of one neuron and the axon terminal of the next. It's the point of communication between two neurons. So many new axons and dendrites form during the process that it's sometimes called exuberant synaptogenesis. This cell growth process continues into a newborn's first year of life. For an information signal or impulse to move from the axon of one neuron to the dendrites of another, it must cross the synaptic gap. In this animation, an impulse looks like a green ball of light. When an impulse reaches the end of an axon, a chemical called a neurotransmitter is released. In this animation, neurotransmitters look like red balls of light. Neurotransmitters allow an impulse to cross from the axon of one neuron, cross the synapse, and onto a receiving dendrite on another neuron. To create a more efficient and rapidly working brain, some of the newly formed synapses are eventually removed. Synaptic pruning occurs during the fetal period, infancy, childhood, and adolescence. It's believed that pruning is a way in which the brain becomes customized to an individual's nervous system as a response to that individual's unique experiences.
Okay, we're gonna pause that. Did you guys find that interesting? What was interesting about it? Just share one thing that stuck with you. One thing. Complex. Complex. Very, very complex. Very important. Another quick thing, and then I'll kind of give you some recaps. Anything else stick with you?
Did I hear the word adapt coming onto the word end?
Adapt. Unique experiences.
Okay.
Pruning and adapting. Yeah. Okay, so the reason why I started with that video is because I wanted you to get a visual of how the brain grows and how it develops. As you listen to people talk online, and you listen to studies, or you hear Ghazi present, you saw that, very impressive video about. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. We're good. We're good. I'll project. So you watched that video that Ghazi showed, or no? Is it time that I call him?
Ghazi, it's okay.
Is it? You watched the video and it was very impactful, right? And there was a lot of thrill and suspense, and this thing is happening to you and to the brain. What was your sense of the brain when you watched that video? Who was in charge? God. God was in charge. Most of us who carried children didn't even know you were pregnant at 4 weeks. The brain was already fully on its way and starting to differentiate between its forebrain and your spine and the spinal cord. That's what sticks out to you. It was a very innate process, although complex and delicate. It was on its way, and you were none the wiser. Completely unaware, maybe a little nauseous, but none the wiser. The reason why I started there is because I wanted you to see the power of creation and the detail with which that creation was done. We have to get in front of the bus, in the driver's seat, and not let the bus run us over out of fear. That's not education, that's fear. You are in the driver's seat. God is in the driver's seat, the supreme driver. So there are a couple of other things I wanted you to take away from that video. One, he said these cells are like gymnasts. While they all start in one little area, they are running to their furthest point. It's almost like they're track stars. And as they run away from that brain, they're all differentiating and fighting and competing to be that a particular part of the body, right? So they're saying, I want to be a limb. I want to be in this part of the central nervous system. I want to be a foot. And so they're all competing and fighting, and the person who runs the furthest gets that reward for that particular area. Not person, cell, whatever you want to call it. I just want to make it easier for you to understand. That's the other thing. God's design is science-based in competition. It is based in competition. We as parents, we get real scared when things are competing for our children's attention. The body starts in competition. Okay. Sperms start in competition.
Definitely. The biggest ever.
It's a competition. You have to run the race. You have to get the prize. You got to hit the target. That is the human design that God has given us. So as parents, we're going to relax because there's competition in your child's life. That there's social media competing for their attention. Okay, you get it. You get it. That's the design. The other thing I wanted you to pay attention to was they used a term called synaptic pruning. Pruning. What's pruning?